Well, hey, everybody. Good morning. West McDonald and Kenneth Edmonds here. How are you, buddy?
I am fine. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too badly at all. And I know that you are down in your new location broadcasting from lovely Florida.
That is right. This is my new studio. I'm going to make it look a little better as time goes on, and get my real computer back up and my real camera and all those things. But at least I am in my house, in my what will be my office. So that's good.
Well, there's nothing better than a blank canvas, so you'll have an opportunity to make it completely your own. And super thrilled that you're able to join us because you had a pretty busy weekend, right?
Yes, it was a busy week. In the last, let's call it 10 days now, I sold a house, I bought a house, I loaded all my stuff, moved to Florida, unloaded all of my stuff, and I'm starting to get the new house set up. So it has been a busy 10 days.
Yeah, it certainly has, and it's been fun watching you go through the progression. And I'm just going to try and get Blair Dawson back in. We've had some technical difficulty with sound, so let's see if this will work. All right, testing 1 2 3.
Okay. How do we... Am I here now?
Yeah,
you're here.
All right. I can this too.
Oh, really nice to see you, Blair. How are you?
I'm really well. Good to see you too.
Yeah, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I am so happy that you engage in this topic. Obviously, I think it's really important, and I think it's important to your audience as well.
Yeah, I really do. And, the first time, just for our audience, just to give you some background, the first time that Blair and I met was actually at a CompTIA event. I actually had the good fortune of watching a panel that Blair was part of, in which a couple of real providers who had experienced some negative effects of, let's say, cyber activity. And they were sharing kind of what they went through and, some of the things that they could have done differently. And one of the top ones, obviously, was making sure that you had somebody that understands what to do from a legal perspective when you're encounter something like that. And it's funny, Blair, I was actually, before I go any further, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. Obviously, my name is Blair Dawson. I'm with the Cybersecurity and Data Privacy team at McDonald Hopkins. We're a full-service law firm, but my practice focuses on cybersecurity and data privacy, which means pre-breach services, putting policies in place, incident response plans, that kind of preparation, tabletops as well, where you do the role playing to get acquainted with the process. And then should a crisis happen, we assist with the incident response itself. So we work with companies to navigate that, whether it's a business email compromise or a ransom event.
Yeah, I love it. And we're going to get into some of those topics and many more in more detail. And one of the things, now that I've let you introduce yourself, that I found fascinating about the panel discussion was I hadn't really thought much about what to do when you're dealing with security. Like, security as an offering is one thing. We've all been to panels where they talk about the different things we can do to help our customers stay safe. Some of the loopholes where we can never keep people entirely safe, all that kind of stuff, but never really got into the legal ramifications and also some of the other stuff that's involved, which I'll get into. Before I go any further, we always start with, where are you watching from? So Blair is our guest today. Where are you joining us from?
I am in the Chicago area.
Nice. I do love Chicago, and I cannot wait to get back there. And for anyone else that's watching today, make sure you do share with us where you're from. Greg Walters, I know you're on the call today, so would love to know which part of the world you're from. And Ken, this is your favorite part. We get people from all over the world: United Arab Emirates, United States, Canada, Australia.
What about the EU? Because we have several folks that will join us from time to time. We see Greg is in Michigan still. He hasn't gone back to Oconomowoc. I like that word. I say it a lot.
Well, welcome from Michigan, and thanks again for joining in. And of course, I'm in lovely Canada, right across the border from Buffalo, close to Niagara Falls. And there's a rainy day here. And Ken, where are you from?
I now am in Central Florida. So
that's right, brand new move. And Sarah Henderson joins us from Des Moines, Iowa. Midwest is the best. Love it. Absolutely. All right, we're going to dive right in. So one of the first things that I want to talk about is this concept of a carrier. And I know in some of the talks that we've had, you've said, obviously, that's who you should start with. If something happens, you suffer some kind of incident. So what is a carrier, and why should folks start with those?
Yeah, I talk about the carrier relationship a lot. I think it's really important that if an organization, if at all possible, can avail themselves of cybersecurity insurance, they should do that. The carriers have access to a panel of different vendors, and that'll include legal, like me and my team, as well as forensic investigators, data mining companies, and so forth. And they're constantly vetting them for performance, and they'll be able to get those pieces in place very quickly, which is probably the most important thing for businesses. You want to get operational as quickly as possible. And you also want to be in compliance and make sure you don't miss any deadlines if they're regulatory or if they're in your contracts. So the first call, if you have cyber insurance, is to look to your deck page, look for the notice instructions, and give notice to your carrier, and they will respond very quickly. It's not a matter of days or weeks. You will get a response very quickly.
Yeah, and I got to think, you mentioned that, if you do have sort of a carrier that offers the cyber insurance, and I got to feel that if you're thinking, there's a lot of folks to be watching this from, different channels, the Office Equipment channel, that are looking to diversify into different services, and they may not have ever, practiced cybersecurity before offered to their customers. And I got to think having a carrier should be one of the first considerations that they should make, no?
Oh, absolutely. Because just the risk transfer, the cost of having a crisis happen and having the capital available to shoulder that, depending on how deep the crisis goes, it may exhaust the capital that an organization has. So it's just good practice to be able to shift the risk, just like you would for property, crime, things like that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, certainly for the rest of our businesses, we do have insurance, right? For lots of other aspects, be it liability or, for inventory, for any of those things, right? So this certainly would seem like a no-brainer to me, right? And are they called anything else, or is it like strictly a carrier?
It just an insurance
Okay.
carrier. If you're working with the London market, it'd be syndicates, but yeah, those are the major ones.
Yeah. And, I got to think how important this really is, right? Because one of the stats I'll share, I've actually been working on a blog on this. And one of the stats that I looked up said that, folks in the managed IT and MSP space, it wasn't the clearest stat in the world, but it said 50% of them or more had some kind of interaction with a cyber incident, right? So, and I'll talk a little bit about that because I'm trying to be careful with my words right now, but that they had some kind of interaction, not necessarily that they were hacked or breached or anything else, right? So those odds seem pretty high that something's, going to happen, right? And it's got to be a tough job for you because I got to think that, by the time you get busy with helping, clients, something has happened, right? So obviously that relationship must start, pretty early on to make sure that you're comfortable with each other when something like that happens, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, the majority of my work does come from referrals of organizations that are already in crisis.
Oh, wow.
Usually after that, they appreciate and understand the importance of doing the preparation. So then we'll look at doing the pre-breach services, which is kind of a misnomer given that they've been through it, but just in preparation for the next time. Because really, it's if you as secure as you believe that you are, it's along the lines of the analogy of us being the COs in a prison. The prisoners have 24/7 to try to figure out ways to get around your security, and you have other things as a business that you're dealing with. So to pretend as though you're too small or that obscurity is your security, that's just not going to work. It's just too easy for them to automate their searches for gaps in your security and hit you. I think it's a misnomer that people think that it's going to be these big whales that these threat actors are going after. Quite often, or quite frankly, it's smaller. They'll do small payments because it's easier to get it from you. And they know that you don't have the capability to fight back in a lot of ways. So to get that planning and preparation in place, it's good from an insurance standpoint, you're a better risk, but also do your team a favor, having them go through baptism by fire and try to figure this out while they're in crisis and save the business rather than having a plan in place and practice it really puts you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I like what you say there because it kind of reminds me of the natural world, right? And that wolves, as strong as they are, even when they're hunting in a pack, they're not
Mhm.
going after the biggest elk in the herd, right? They are looking
Right.
for stragglers and weak ones that they'll have a better opportunity to take down, right? So
Mhm.
I got to think if you're in business and like you said, they're gonna probably assume correctly that some of the smaller to mid-sized providers have less resources to be able to kind of deal with those kind of things. So
Yeah.
less of a payout. But another stat that I was reading was that these kind of threat actor incidents are increasing by 10 to 15% a quarter, right? So it's kind of astounding to think that they're not slowing down. That they're actually increasing their what the activity that they're doing, and that's got to mean they're spreading a wider net, right? So not
Mhm.
to sound alarmist, but this isn't going away, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a realistic perspective. I'm an optimist, but some of that comes with the idea of having your preparation and planning in place, so you come out at the end better than when you first went in if you weren't prepared. I think also something to touch on is that some of these, when you're talking about they're not going for the largest elk, it reminded me to mention that some of these are ransom as a service, so you don't have to be skilled. You buy a software, hopefully not you, West, but you go out and you buy this software and you just run it, and you don't have to be that sophisticated. And in some respects, that's almost works to deal with an unsophisticated amateur threat actor than somebody that knows what they're doing and they run it as a quote unquote business, because then they're all over the place and negotiating with them can be really difficult. So don't assume that they're going for the big ones.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with people in the security space, and they've been talking about this as a service stuff, and you can go onto the dark web and you can get this stuff literally just paying a fee to be able to have access to the tools, and everything is as a service now, not just the good guys, but the bad guys too, right? So that
Mhm.
certainly spreads out the risk there, right? Now, one of the other things that I remember us talking about was this idea. You were kind of joking in one of the other calls that we had, and you said the first person you call obviously is your carrier. Don't call the media, right? Like, you know, and that raises an important question though. So if the carrier's first, and then obviously once you're in touch with the carrier and someone like yourself, which specializes in the legal side, that there certainly are words to be careful with as we're starting to talk with our customers to try and let them know what's going on, right? So why do we have to be careful with words? Why can't we just say that we've had a ransomware attack or we've been breached or right out of the gate? Why do we have to be cautious?
Yeah, I think you're touching on probably the second most important aspect from my perspective is the communications, whether that be with your employees or customers or regulators. Um, Breach, for instance, that's a term of art. It talks about actually compromised sensitive data, or PII, personally identifying information. That's to natural persons. If you start using language as a company that you've been breached or that you're under a ransom event or something like that, hacked, those are very salacious terms, and you're in the embryonic state of trying to figure out what happened. There's been instances where clients have made statements along those lines, and it turns out that it wasn't that at all. It was perhaps a software glitch or something like that. Now they have to clean up that mess. So it's walking a line between your business interests of being transparent with your staff and also with your customers to not undermine trust, but also not paint yourself in a corner where you engender more scrutiny or more interest or bad press. So going out there and making suppositions or guesses about what happened before you have concrete evidence from perhaps your forensic investigation team, for instance, that can be a real bad move, because one bad statement or one statement that you think is very carefully crafted but misinterpreted by your audience, they'll hold you to what they thought you said. And if it changes over time, which it always does, they're going to hold you to that and then question your motives, question your credibility, question your professionalism, and whether you're able to respond to the incident in a good way.
So I had to kick Wes because I can't get a word in elsewise.
I wondered what happened to him.
But I wanted to go back to something you said, because I am such a big proponent of planning. And so the pre-incident discussions that you have with clients, I'm sure that you go through, and create a strategy so that if they think something's happened, here are the steps that they should go through and try to build out a response so that you don't inadvertently say something you shouldn't have, or you don't, that you don't overreact. And part of that has to be employee training, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You've touched on so many things there. You're a man after my heart. So if you have an incident response plan, you can plug in the communications. You can have a template, and you can modify that template for the incident itself, tailor it to what occurred, and then modify that over time. The training piece, even in tandem with that would be broader than just the incident response team that would be knowledgeable about the specifics of the incident response plan. The training is absolutely key. Just a reminder to folks, like, don't click on links, and give them concrete examples of what that looks like. Sometimes they don't understand what the email addresses might actually look like. So giving them examples that L's might be turned into ones, or extra letters might be there, or give pause, talk to your IT department if you just suspect for a second. Kind of like, if you have to ask, then you should. You pause. So I think the training is absolutely key, because especially in the business email compromises, I think every time I consult with a client during the first call, a scoping call, every time they say they wish they had training in place, and they suspect somebody probably clicked the phishing link. And most of the time that is the case. Yeah.
And I'll share two stories there. One was that I worked at an organization. I won't name the name of the company, but the person that was in charge of accounts payable got an email from the president of the company saying, hey, just to let you know, blah, 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 we need to send this payment. She thought something was phishing. And when she looked at it, sure enough, that the email link was almost exactly the same, except that it had an extra letter in it. And if you weren't paying attention, so they went as far as to buy that domain, right? And 2 years ago, I was really fascinated with some of these new phishing, campaigns that they're doing. And some of them are either text-based or voicemail. And I found an online voice generator, which I played around with for, about 3 days to get used to my voice. And then I simply typed out an entire message, and then I dubbed it over a video of myself where I wasn't speaking. I was just basically mouthing the words. And then afterwards it said that entire thing that you just listened to wasn't me speaking. That was computer generated. And it's shocking, right? Like the tools that they have available now to fool us. So
absolutely. The social engineering has gotten so sophisticated, and the tools that are available just to everyday people, a little bit frightening. It's fascinating and frightening.
Yes, absolutely. Now, one of the things we talked about when we're looking at sort of this incident response planning, right, is, and I remember one of the dealers on the panel had mentioned this, is that they actually had a hard time they had a plan, but they had a hard time getting to it because it was on a computer, it was locked down. So what kind of advice do you have for making sure you have access to it?
He had a couple challenges. One, that it was on a system that had been encrypted, and then secondly, he was the only one that knew about it. So the advice is, once you go through the process of getting an incident response plan, go old school. Have it in a binder, print it out. And sometimes people have a misconception that these incident response plans are like 1,000 pages. The idea is to keep it quick and concise, because you have to be mindful that you're going to be looking at this in a crisis situation. So you want to be able to reference it quickly and be able to assimilate the information in there. So you might have a few pages that you're printing off. You'll have the phone tree for all the key people, especially those that are designated roles in the incident response on the plan. You may want to have your insurance policy copied with that as well, so you can refer to that, especially to give notice to your carrier at the outset. Let's see, there's I think one of the things that, it sounds like a joke, but I'm not joking, is like the key people should have a copy in the trunk of their car. So as they're responding, they're not leaving it at their house and they have to go back, or they're joining a call and from their car and so forth because they forgot it. Having it in paper, going old school.
Yeah. Hey, Ken, how do you think the Office Equipment Channel feels about that?
They're probably okay with people printing it, but as an industry, we're not very good about having that, because just to carry along with that, I believe every manager should have the copy of their disaster response team plan, somewhere with them at all times. Mm-hmm. I asked the question to service managers: if you drove up and your building had burned to the ground, what would you do?
Right.
Well, the deer in the headlight look isn't going to work. You got to have a plan, and you need to have it where you can get to it and get started, because you have hours to get things started, or you could be out of business.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly right. Because the example that Wes just gave too, they couldn't even recover the plan until halfway through the response to the incident. At that point, you're so far behind the 8 ball, you might be able to pick it up at some point, but you've already done ad hoc band-aiding with getting people involved. I think another challenge, if I remember right, I think he might have also mentioned that it had been so stale at that point that with personnel changes, most of the people that were on the roster weren't even there anymore, let alone familiar with the plan. So that's another challenge. Like once you put it to paper, make sure you revisit it at least on an annual basis, maybe more if you have a lot of changes going on in your organization, or just a moderate amount of changes, frankly, because if you lose one key person in your incident response plan, that can be really important.
Yeah, and I love this concept of, it's kind of like the Karate Kid. What was it? Wax on, wax off. Like, the more, that you practice, the better you are when it actually comes to the real event, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in karate and in life, the more we practice, right? And I think that's one of the other things that I like that you've talked about in the past was this idea of tabletopping it, right? Like of actually, going through the scenarios and, kind of getting a feel for what it might be like, heaven forbid that day actually comes, right?
Right. And that can actually be a fun exercise. It's not just dryly going through page by page, but you come up with a scenario. Maybe there's a CISO on the team or a tech person that understands the business and what might be most harmful and what's most realistic. And then we, as the legal team, put together a scenario and you work through that. And it's really interesting to see, as thorough as a business might be, once you start going through the practice of it, you identify gaps. One that pops up would be who's going to sign the checks to our employees if payroll is locked down. Who's going to have authority to pay our vendors? If first identify that person. Are they going to be the point person? Are they going to be the CFO? And then what if they're not available? Like having, those are really key for some businesses, especially with keeping their employees paid. That's really key.
Yeah, and on this idea of gamification, I'm just doing a, well, it's not really a plug. I just love these guys. It's actually a gamification of, a bunch of different sort of cyber scenarios that you could encounter. Mm-hmm. And you do play it as a game. And this idea of education, and I know that you shared one with me as well before, which was through one of the universities, right? That people can actually.
Right. Yeah, the one that I discovered was through Harvard education. I'm doing my master's in cybersecurity through UW.
Oh, wow.
And that was one of the programs, one of the courses had that. So the one that you showed just right now is more slick for sure. The one that I thought it was very realistic, because it definitely would stress you out. It puts you out in there as the new CFO, and you have to go through the simulation. But I think it's really helpful to get people thinking about aspects of a response that they otherwise may not consider.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, like we do see a lot of the, ransomware is one of them, right? But there are, phishing campaigns and so many other things that, bad actors can, go after us with, right? So I think that kind of education is probably the critical one, right? Ken, you mentioned it. I think, we've got a good friend in the space. He started doing security services about 5 years ago, and education is one of his biggest things with his customers, right? It's just continuous because the threats change on a regular basis, right?
And I want to say that's an interesting thought too, because for people in our business, in our space, one of the things that they can do after they go through this process themselves is they can help businesses learn how to do it, to offer the education piece as a service, and help them evaluate their disaster plan. I talk about it with disaster plans in general. So many businesses do not have a disaster plan. And so it's not only something that you need to have yourself, but it's something that could become a service to your client. So maybe they don't have security with you. Maybe they're doing it all in-house. Have they thought about these things? And so you could run maybe let's call it an assessment, your favorite word, Les, but run an assessment of their policies and procedures they have in place, and then help them find ways to improve, because that is something that could save one of their customers' businesses for them.
I completely agree with that, because I think a lot of times customers don't even know where to start. A lot of times when I have people approach me at conferences, for instance, or at a dinner party, they know that they don't know, and they don't know enough to be able to formulate the questions. They know they have an inkling of what they might need, but if they have somebody to partner with them to walk through some key topics where they might have gaps, that really starts the conversation, and they can think about, start quantifying their risks. And that's part of the process too. Another aspect is doing the risk assessment about what kind of data do you have, where are your network components. But it can go as granular as a client might want, but they may need guidance in that way to get them started.
Well, that's great. And hey, listen, I always like to ask the impossible questions. So I'm going to ask that now, just in respect for your time and that of our viewers, because we typically keep this to about half an hour. But if you had one piece of advice for folks trying to get, started down this path, to not just offer security services, but to be able to make sure that they're protected, what would that be?
To make sure that their clients are protected?
Well, maybe them or their clients. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is to see if there is any framework in the first place. Has somebody already visited an incident response plan that maybe you're not aware of? And then go from there. Also, maybe go a tangent on that point would be on the preparation. If you have a carrier relationship, you already have a policy with an insurer, they are more and more providing tools to their insureds to be better risks. So you might want to reach out to them as well and see what tools are available.
Well, that's great. And I guess the other question is, it's not the impossible question, but how can they find you?
Oh, easy. You can find me at McDonaldHopkins.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Again, my name is Blair Dawson, and I'm with the Cybersecurity and Data Privacy Group.
Well, that's great. And I just did put the website up there, so it's fairly easy, McDonaldHopkins.com. You can get in there and search around for the services. And I know that I did, let's see if I can bring it up here. You can actually find Blair right there on the website as well. So I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. This topic has become really, I think, important in our space. I've been speaking with other security specialists that have said that even the separation between managing a customer's data and securing it now is starting to become almost impossible to separate, right?
Agreed.
And that this kind of topic is only going to get, more important as we go forward. And yes, Greg, agree. Very cool.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. I love that you're highlighting this topic.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, it's one of those ones that we're going to really need to dig into more and more as time goes on, especially as what technology service providers do continues to merge and to converge, right? So for everyone that's tuned in today, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. And don't forget to keep learning and level up.